thank you everybody for showing up. I've had a chance to meet everyone, talk a little bit to everyone. I want to, since we have a smaller group, I'll try to make it a little more informal. We won't have to go through such a rigid, this is this slide, this is how this goes, because I kind of have, obviously I've done the presentation. I counsel clients daily, monthly, you can name it. So, but the information provided in there, you have my bio, which explains a little bit. I think it's important that you know my background. In addition to being an attorney, I'm also a CPA. I personally don't do tax returns. I have someone in my office that if we have clients that want the tax returns done, I'm not the guy doing tax returns. I use it more as a avenue when I'm working with clients. I have a pretty good understanding of tax situations, dealing with the IRS, and certain things like that. And of course, federal estate tax exemptions, because my specialty is estate planning. I created the 20-minute emergency estate planning blueprint for real estate investors. I realized a couple years ago that there was kind of like everybody did wills and trusts, but they didn't specialize in working with real estate investors that wanted to know what happens if my spouse takes over and I'm gone. What happens when we're now in a second family? We now have stepkids. Do they get certain properties or don't they? What are their rights? So I've tried to come up with solutions for them for that type of business owner and entrepreneur. And you in turn will see that here in a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about some of the Casanova clauses that I created to help families, and some of the other unique clauses that we place in our documents, in our estate planning documents, to help protect you. Because at the end of the day, I want you and your family protected from the evil government, from greedy creditors and greedy in-laws, sometimes evil in-laws, it depends where you're at. And also kind of give you a rough overview of kind of what estate planning is, some of the basics, wills and trusts, things like that. But first and foremost, your first step planning for your real estate empire, because everyone here sounds like very savvy real estate investors, and you guys are definitely in a great group that provides relative information. I've seen some of the speakers, and I look forward to this upcoming year for the set of speakers that they're looking at bringing in. As it relates to estate planning, in addition to the technical things of doing the estate plans, I actually litigate the plans. I'm the guy that they call in when families think that they're being ousted from certain estate plans. So I'm physically in. I've tried cases, juries, judges. I'm the guy that gets called in to sue the family member, unfortunately. Right now, next week we have a hearing to take away a purported spouse's rights under Michigan law, because there's technical reasons. So that's the type of planning when I come to the table to help someone with their objectives. It's not just, well, all I do is just the documents. It'd be like someone who's building homes, but yet probably doesn't, that may not know much about plumbing and heating. Someone that knows everything, that really knows how to do that actual job. So I think that's important to know. I don't know if that's laid out too well in the bio. But statistically, more than 70% of families have zero estate planning in place. That means no wills, definitely no trusts. Very few have medical powers, and I'll get to that here in a little bit as to the medical powers of attorney and how that can help between you and spouses and loved ones and having access to medical records. And something pretty neat that I'm going to go over is one of the biggest things that I've seen is with our aging population. It may not pertain to you, but it may pertain to mom, dad, grandma, grandpa. How do you get access to their medical information if you don't have a piece of paper that says, I in turn have access? Or better yet, even if you do get the piece of paper and you do what 25 to 30% actually do with regards to estate planning, where do you get it on a Friday night at 10 o'clock at night? So I'm going to go over with you our 24/7 access system that we partnered with the company. It's kind of cool. So I'll go over that with you. As you see here in slide 3, do you fear a angry tenant suing you? How many of you have had tenants? And the potential of them suing you is probably great. Just the way our society is, our laws work, they have certain rights. We were just talking about certain rights that tenants have that you probably don't want them to have. But there's a way. I'm going to go over with you one of our platinum waiver and release, because even after that tenant leaves or if there's a dispute, under Michigan law, and depending on what the contract says, they may have 3 years, 5 years, 6 years to come back and sue you. Now, I don't know about all of you. I think you probably don't want to be waiting around knowing that this tenant's out there. So I in turn will get into that a little bit later. But also with regards to tenants suing you, how can that affect your family? In addition, do you in turn fear you or your spouse, your assets going into probate court? Do you fear a creditor potentially taking your kids' any and all assets out of their inheritance? These are the types of fears. In addition to that, not having access, what I just talked about, not having access to your medical records in a timely basis. These are just some of the concerns that go into estate planning and protecting your real estate empire. Because if you have multiple homes, the last thing you want, even if you have LLCs set up, it doesn't mean that you're protected from liability, unless there's fraud or a couple things that I'll talk about here. But you're not protected from the probate court. And once you're in a probate court, I like to think our judges read everything. But unfortunately, once you're in the court system, you are at the will, unfortunately, of not just the attorney that represents you, but opposing attorneys, opposing parties. And I always tell clients, I say, well, if I die, who can come and contest to get my property? Well, do you have neighbors? A neighbor can come in. I've seen a neighbor come in and say that they're the ones that get the house. Anybody can contest it. Now, it doesn't mean that they have standing, but it gets pretty irritating, and it creates this emotional flux on families, and I've seen it. So there's ways to protect it. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But if these are some of the fears that you in turn have, then this is the message for you today, to hear this information. If you have done your planning, I appreciate the fact that you did it. Hopefully you'll pick up a few things that you should have additionally in your planning. And if you haven't done your planning, hopefully you take the time, because it's a serious matter, because my objective is to make sure that you're not spending additional time, costs, resources that could be going elsewhere as opposed to dealing with headaches. Not that attorneys cause the headaches, but once attorneys are involved, we in turn unfortunately have a way of getting under the skin of clients. And I don't know how many of you have ever hired attorneys, but it's all fun when you're up front and you're meeting with them, and then 3 months later when you get another bill, it's not as fun. I mean, let's just be real. My family's hired attorneys prior to myself being an attorney. They've hired attorneys even while acting as an attorney, someone I've referred them, and it's just not fun. But it's my job. I have fun doing it, but at the same time, I take it very seriously. Now, a few of the individuals on page 2 here who are actually using this. One of the things I did, I partnered with a company last year that's selling the system that I'm talking to you about through a third party to Ron LeGrand's client list. Now, Ron LeGrand, some of you may or may not know, is probably a pretty known, or he's still on the national speaking circuit, but he's done a ton of real estate investing. You've probably read his books, information. So I thought it was important to at least point out. In addition to that, obviously, Donald Trump, let me just explain, he doesn't use my system, but these techniques and strategies that I'm talking to you about are utilized in his estate planning. I had the good fortune about 5 years ago, I had a client that we actually sold about 12 websites back to the Trump Organization. Now, if you've ever dealt with not just the Trump Organization, an attorney from New York, it's pretty short and sweet, and by the way, you play by their rules. We were able to get some favorable results selling the websites back. But it was interesting talking to them about, because I told them obviously what my mainstay is, the estate planning focus. And the websites we were selling was out of a trust that was created, and unfortunately someone passed away. And talking to them about what they did for them. Obviously, they're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm talking about, essentially chump change compared to that. But it's interesting talk about them and to hear that, okay, I'm on the right path. Now, this was 5 years ago, but you can use the same techniques and strategies as the celebrities use. But many people don't realize that. And I was talking a little bit to a few of you about the Kennedys. And I'm going to get to that here in a minute about how they protected their money. And we saw this past summer, I think June and July, I saw more celebrities pass away than any other time. And my press releases were going out, you can turn name it. And so what we did was with Farrah Fawcett, many may or may not know, her son had a drug problem. I don't know if he still does. I don't know if he got rehab.